What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video about Baldur's Gate 3, and specifically 2 years later, as its 2-year anniversary was just 2 days ago from the time of this video on August 3rd, technically speaking. But I've been a little bit busy, so it took me an extra day to get around to it. Now, I should probably start this video out by mentioning that, to be honest with you, this one might just be a little self-indulgent, in the sense that 2 years on, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is very obviously a smash success, to a degree that nobody really expected, neither the team at Larian themselves or even myself, who had covered it all the way up until its release, and obviously quite a bit afterwards. I think it's a game that surpassed basically everybody's expectations. So obviously it is doing very well, and while I am going to talk about some of the updates and things that were the most meaningful to me kind of throughout that journey there, the main reason I kind of wanted to make this video was to let it serve as a sort of bookend to all of that coverage that I have done for the game, because with its final patch, or final major patch I should say, being out this past April, with any further things just going to be things like hot fixes, bug fixes, that kind of thing, and even that seems to be winding down a little bit, I have basically covered this game backwards and forwards, and while there will always be creative stuff people can do to make content for it, for the most part I think I'm pretty well done covering it myself, outside of perhaps an inclusion in a list video somewhere in the future, that kind of thing. But it has really been a journey, and I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about that a little bit. And while I will primarily be talking about the 2 years from its launch till now, it is probably important to remember that this game started its journey in early access. It was in early access for quite a long time, I might add. Went through a bunch of different iterations, and while I covered all of that even, I want to sort of start this tale a few days ahead of the game's launch. You see, I did actually receive a review key for Baldur's Gate 3 before it launched, but the timing was honestly pretty rough, so they sent the review keys out, I think it was maybe 3 days before launch. It's been a little while, but it was very close to the finish line, and because of when the review keys went out, basically nobody had a full review done for the game's actual launch. Except for yours truly. I was legitimately probably one of the first people outside of the studio to have finished the game ahead of its scheduled embargo timing. Now, the way I was able to do that was by cutting my videos for the next couple of days. I just didn't post anything while I worked on this, and I slept very little. And even then, I was still editing the video itself the morning it was supposed to go live at about noon for me. And even beyond just the marketing that had went viral previously to that, it was pretty obvious from a full playthrough right then that this was clearly going to be a really big deal. That is to say, the game itself was very good. Now, I wanted to start kind of right there, because if you've watched that original launch review of mine, you may very well remember that I noted a lot of problems that went on to be fixed in subsequent patches, and at the very least addressed anyway. And in fact, in the 2 years since this game's launch, there's really only a couple of things that I would have liked to have seen, but honestly at this point are more nitpicky considering how much they have done, and that was basically that we didn't get to see the other district of Baldur's Gate, that is to say the upper city primarily, and there's also the way the game kind of converges at the end of Act 2 before you get to the city in the situation with the Emperor, where prior to that point the game is extremely open and reactive to everything you're doing. That moment kind of really funnels you down to one story instance that really just does not give you a lot of narrative leadway before, heading back in to finish up the game in Act 3. And obviously I know why they did that. But if I am being nitpicky, it is something that always kind of bothered me. And realistically, those two things are really just about all that they have left that I initially took issue with. Now, probably I would say the thing they did the most with in terms of additions is actually all of the changes to improve quality of life stuff. Now, while they obviously added much bigger things than everything I'm about to mention, like all of the modding support and everything, to me, the most memorable thing they did was add all of these little quality of life improvements, like being able to share inventories and stuff in the camp, and changes like that are honestly, I would say, what had the biggest impact for me personally over a dozen playthroughs. I mean, realistically, my favorite change they made was probably just adding the Hexblade Warlock in patch 8, mind you. They have really done an enormous amount of work. Probably the most notable change for most people would realistically be everything they did to Act 3 as well as the actual endings. So the ending scenes were a little brief initially, and as we now all know, patch 5 actually wound up bringing an entire epilogue to the game that actually gave a more satisfying conclusion and tried to wrap up and provide closure on just a whole bunch of stuff that made the ending a lot more impactful than it was previously. But with that stuff said, let's actually give a quick rundown of the patches themselves. So unsurprisingly, patch 1 was mostly immediate fixes, a little bit of balancing, stuff like that. That launched on August 25th, 2023. Patch 2 followed not long after that, August 31st, 2023, and this one was a little more substantial. For starters, it provided you a way of dismissing co-op party members from the campaign entirely, continue on without them basically. It also addressed some of the stuff going on in Karlach's ending, kind of, how it was not initially very satisfying at all, and it allowed a little more conclusion there, which was not surprising as she, frankly, was a bit of a later addition than the others. And there was quite a few changes to things like the UI, just kind of general quality of life stuff there, so some important stuff, but not exactly groundbreaking. Now, patch 3 is where it starts to get a little more interesting. This brought Mac support for the people playing on Mac. It also brought us the magic mirror, allowing you to change your appearance whenever you please. Which I've got to say, in a game like this, where your characters can grow and change over the course of the adventure quite a bit, the magic mirror is actually a pretty useful way for displaying that physically. And this is also where they started fine-tuning things like, say, audio cues, fringe cases where cinematics might be a little weird, that type of stuff. Patch 4, on the other hand, was truly massive with like 1,000-something bug fixes. It was pretty substantial. But that honestly was most of what the actual patch was. It was primarily those bug fixes. Nothing too crazy content-wise, but this one was still in 2023, November 2nd to be specific. Patch 5, as I mentioned, was very substantial in the form of actual new content, as it brought us all of the epilogues to the game, showcasing all sorts of stuff. It also brought us Honor Mode, which you can get your own set of golden dice for completing, and in fact, with the recent statistics they put out of the 2-year anniversary, about 4,000 or so people managed to beat Honor Mode at just level 1. But between those two things and all of the changes that came with them, patch 5 was also pretty massive, especially considering that Honor Mode also brought Custom Mode, which allows you to tweak the difficulty settings to your heart's content. Coincidentally, patch 5 is also the patch that made a lot of the camp management stuff a little easier, allowing you to access inventories of characters that aren't in your party, that kind of stuff. Patch 6 brought even more quality of life stuff, fixes to how romance little cutscenes worked, especially for shorter characters, but also, refining things like the epilogue and honor mode that they had just added previously. Patch 7 was another gigantic one because this is the one that brought the proper in-game mod manager as well as the modding toolkit, basically allowing mods to be more readily accessible to basically everyone right from in-game. By far and away the biggest thing patch 7 did, but it also did a lot of other stuff, like for instance enhancing all of the evil endings. It also further refined Honor Mode, adding things like new legendary actions to the Honor Mode bosses, and of course a whole host of fixes to all sorts of little things along the way, but the evil endings and the mod management were by far the biggest. And then last but not least, the final major patch is none other than, of course, patch 8, which brought not only full crossplay support, on top of a proper photo mode, but it also brought us the 12 new subclasses, one for each class effectively, and these were mostly, I would say, the most highly sought after of them, such as the Hexblade Warlock, as I had previously mentioned. And this is also where they cleared up some just lingering issues with various things, such as when they allowed Minthara to be recruited in good playthroughs. Occasionally this would cause issues in Act 2 when she's supposed to show up, but, did not always. So they fixed stuff like that was still hanging around. And while that is an incredibly quick and reductive look at kind of all the major stuff they added, it's worth noting that every single one of those patches almost always updated or added small and subtle things that really changed the game in impactful ways to the people who actually experienced them. And so, obviously, it shouldn't be undersold. But all of that to say that in the past 2 years, Baldur's Gate 3 has had an incredible journey, not only in terms of its actual popularity, but also just in revamping and changing and improving so many things along the way, to the point where almost all of my original criticisms in my initial launch review have been addressed in some way. And while I still have a couple of minor nitpicky things, BG3 kind of really is a CRPG for the ages now. But when talking about its actual impact on the wider gaming world, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this one kind of is going to be one of those generational games, not only for what it did for CRPGs, which, I mean, to keep it short, the success of BG3 obviously prompted a lot of interest in the genre itself, and this obviously allowed people like myself to show other people more and more CRPGs, my favorite genre. And while I would say the only thing really close to BG3 is like Divinity Original Sin 2, which Larian also made as an example, it's still an incredible genre with a lot to offer, and the success of this game allowed more people to see that. But then there's what it did for Larian themselves. Obviously, a game that was this successful has put Larian in a very unique position, that is to say, one that is going to afford them the time and luxury to do basically everything they want to do with whatever this next game they're working on is, which they have, teased in the sense that they've said it's going to take us a little while before we're ready to show it, but the success of BG3 has basically given them all the leeway in the world to do exactly that. And given the absolutely incredible job they did with BG3, I think pretty much everybody is more than happy to give them that time. Now, personally, I would really love Divinity 3, as my favorite thing from Larian is actually their Divinity series, which I had been covering previously before BG3 was kind of even in the picture. And I wanted to mention that specifically because for a lot of people, Baldur's Gate 3 was kind of a life-changing experience. I've talked about what it did for me in the channel many times previously, but this time I'd rather focus on the fact that with all the uncertainty of the gaming industry the past couple of years, with all the layoffs, things like that from companies that continue to report record profits, the success of this game has allowed Larian to continue obviously being passionate about what they do in a way that is not something that has to line up with the way corporations have chosen to run the gaming market. And given some of the words from Larian's employees talking about, everything they've been able to do working on this next game they've already got in production, as example, it's very obvious that BG3 changed a lot of their lives very directly, though I'd say that was probably kind of a given to some degree. And then, of course, there's all the people who played it that resonated with the game in some way, and it had an impact on their personal lives and what they got out of video games, as an example. So when it comes to talking about Baldur's Gate 3 2 years later, I would say the simplest way to put it is that I have not seen a game be this successful basically since The Witcher 3 and Skyrim. I mean, at least as far as the RPG space goes. To be fair, I don't really keep up with a lot of other genres, so they may have some other stuff going on, I guess. But in the single-player RPG space might be a slightly more accurate way to put it. But from being a tiny channel that covered this game when it first hit early access to being now able to do this as my full-time job very comfortably, in no small part to the success that Baldur's Gate 3, among other games, brought, it has been honestly just a wild ride covering this game. And while I'm obviously going to continue to play it in the future, I may very well have a video or two about it here and there on occasion, much like I had to do with Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous last year, which is my personal favorite game. It, kind of stopped receiving updates and finally got all its DLC out, so I made my content and, kind of just had to be on my way. That's kind of what this video is for Baldur's Gate 3 for me. I have covered this game to death. I had a blast with it. In fact, I hope that, 20-something years from now, other people play this game, enjoy it for what it is, and are so passionate about it that they wind up making videos about the obscure 5th edition rule set that it uses that has long since been out of vogue, and decides to make a few videos covering it, and that those videos are some of the things that put them on the map. So while I'm kind of passing the baton on to the future for this one, I'm honestly still looking forward to seeing all the creative ways people play this and wind up making content about it. And I hope in 10 to 20 years I can watch some lengthy retrospective on it and fondly remember that I was there. For now, though, I think that's pretty much going to do it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, this one was honestly pretty self-indulgent of me. So if anything, thank you for indulging me. But if you did enjoy all of that, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.